So this session will discuss the role of companies to bring a sense of meaning to their enterprises at a time when workers are doing a lot of soul searching about the roles of work in their lives. So this panel will be moderated by Janelle Nanos. Janelle is business reporter at the Boston Globe. So I will turn it over to Janelle, who will turn it over to the rest of the panel to introduce themselves. So welcome, Janelle, and to the expert panel.
Chairs for everyone here. Can everyone hear me okay? Hi. Wow. I haven't done this in 2.5 years. This is a really big, different thing for me. Thank you so much. I'm Janelle Nanos. I'm a business reporter with the Boston Globe. I'm really excited to host this panel today because I think it's touching on a lot of things that we're all thinking about right now as we're heading back into the office, or at least in my case, I'm heading back into the office. This panel, again, is making work meaningful in an uncertain world. And I just am so excited to talk with each of you. If you wouldn't mind, just take a few minutes and introduce yourselves and we can hop in.
Sounds great. It's so wonderful to be here. So thank you to Day One. My name is Wendy Richard. I'm currently the Director of Corporate Social Responsibility and Community Relations for Sanofi, based in Cambridge. We have a few facilities in the greater Boston area, but I am in part of our new Cambridge Crossing campus and support our whole specialty care division in the US, in addition to all of our Massachusetts-based employees.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Great to be here, and many thanks to Day One for bringing us all together. I am part of this organization called Zensar. We are an IT services and consulting organization. We are based out of 33 countries globally, and with a headcount of about 10,000 employees across the globe. In my role, I'm one of the people heads, so I support the businesses that I'm responsible for with people strategy and execution. So looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Dionne Poulton. I am Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer for Care New England's health system, which is based out of Providence, Rhode Island. We have about 8,000 employees and serve many thousands of patients each year. And we have what is called 7 operating units, which include 3 hospitals, 4 medical facilities, and over 80 ambulatory sites across the state. Nice to meet you.
And hi, everybody. My name is Rob Livada, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Solution Architecture for Cybergrants. We are located in Andover, Massachusetts here. And Cybergrants is software for corporate social responsibility. And in my 13 years at Cybergrants, I've helped probably 400-ish clients stand up their systems on our platform.
Fantastic.
Like us.
Right? Like you. Yes, like Sanofi, exactly.
We were sitting in the green room and they were talking amongst themselves so much that I was like, you probably won't even need me here, but I'll get us started. So the pandemic has changed work as we know it, making us reevaluate the way we spend our lives. Tell me a little bit about how your personal relationship to your work has changed over the last 2 years and how that's now informing your role in the office. Who wants to start? Rob, you're shaking your head vigorously.
Sure, okay.
Go ahead.
Well, personal relationship for me and how it's changed in the pandemic. So, as a digital company, as a software company, we went from very much in-person collaboration to fully remote. And it was a tough transition for us, I think, at first, and just understanding how we can all work together, especially onboarding new employees and bringing everybody on board. But what we decided was that we would try to get our faces out there as much as possible. So, using things like Zoom and making sure everybody's got their camera on at meetings, and having personal relationships with folks and having conversations with individuals was key for us. So that's how we kind of broke the ground and started going. And we've been very successful in a remote culture now.
That's great.
Well, I can chime in. We are in a very unique situation because it's healthcare. So as people were going home, we had physicians and nurses and providers that were there working all the way through the pandemic. So I fortunately, I'm not a clinician, so I was actually working remotely, but I had to go in certain days. So it really highlighted the different experiences. Like, we all experienced the same thing, but it didn't affect us the same way. Yeah. And so that really helped us to really think about diversity and the effect that, okay, how about the women, for example, who had to stay home with their children? How did they balance their job even though they got children at home, or it just physicians leaving their the office or leaving the hospital and having to bathe in a separate room or get undressed in the garage. There's so many things that time really kind of changed how we look at our work, and just to make sure that everybody felt included and balanced, because people were still risking their lives while we were at home working remotely.
Absolutely.
I think being part of an IT organization, I think we were in a sense used to working virtually. But just the fact that, a large portion of our headcount suddenly had to work remotely, right? There was a huge amount of change management that had to be done, more so to manage the customer expectations while balancing personal priorities. And I think that was a defining moment for us because, we suddenly realized that, there are some things that we had taken for granted, and we had to, start recognizing some of those aspects, which are very important aspects for our associates. Apart from that, I think, while we were working and, obviously the intention was that, we take care of the customer priorities to the best of our abilities in those trying times. It was also how do you practice self-care? And that as a concept started coming up. So I think a lot of that was, they were there, but they were not being recognized. And I think that came to the forefront. And I think that's something was a learning process for many of us.
So for me and for us at Sanofi, so I started this particular role in CSR 2 years ago, just as things were shutting down for the pandemic. And for me, I think for many of us, it's been, the last couple of years have been a bit of a blur. A lot of stuff has happened in our personal lives and our professional lives, but it's really been, in my estimation, the best of times to be in a role, being able to kind of activate internally around issues of corporate citizenship and how we bring increased value, continued value into the areas that we're focused on: health equity, STEM educational equity, and kind of critical unmet community needs. So with all the hardships that the pandemic continues to present for individuals and for us collectively, just the transparency and kind of the honesty around the conversations about how we're supposed to show up as corporate citizens, and to be in this role and to be kind of the liaison to the external environment, whether it's academic or nonprofit or local government officials, is a really amazing privilege, because it's, in my estimation, and what we want to do at Sanofi is kind of take our corporate impact and shared social value kind of to the next level in the areas where we can affect change, in the, moving more into the vital partnerships, activating more of our employee engagement. So I guess the short answer to your question is, I think the opportunities are very ripe for the kinds of changes that we are all trying to make and how that impacts the kind of internal employee experience.
That's great to hear. I think that's one of the things that you can kind of look at the pandemic from, it heightened so many things in so many ways within the workplace. And I think if you're seeing them as opportunities, that's really where you can make a difference. So you've got, each one of you have talked about the number of people that you have on staff, but clearly one of the big things that we've had to take away from the pandemic over the last 2 years is also the idea of this sense of turnover. We've got the great resignation happening. We're still amid it. Retention and recruitment are becoming even more important in this scenario. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the efforts you've engaged in to both bring people into the office and to keep them there. What are ways that you've enhanced your benefits packages or recruitment efforts to make your workplace a more attractive place to be? Knowing that it's really hard to make people feel like they're part of a culture when you still might be working remotely. What are some things that you guys are doing?
So I think, again, being part of the industry that we are in, the war for talent was always there. So we always had to compete for the top talent, with our competitors. Some of the things that we had to focus on is, connecting with each of our candidates, knowing them as individuals, what do they look for when they are evaluating us as an employer. And therefore, how can we make it like one person at a time kind of an, exercise rather than saying that, kind of broad brushing everything. So And that essentially meant that, once we have got into the process of selection, we ensure that, there's a mentor, there's a buddy associated with some of them, so that they can help them understand the culture of otherwise, typically such interviews and such interactions would happen in a physical environment, and that wasn't there.
Yeah.
So the only way they could experience the culture is through such interactions.
And so is that a new program then, this mentorship? That's
Exactly.
Really interesting.
Yeah. So, and, because without that, I think, we were also losing, our top talent, from the industry, because they couldn't experience what they wanted to experience, and they couldn't get that physical comfort of a physical setting. So we had to, bring in such initiatives, and that I think has helped us.
That's great.
So for us, the nursing has been, there's been a shortage even before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And it's predicted that as of 2030, they said that over 1 million nurses will leave the profession at that time.
Wow.
So, and just imagine we're competing with a whole bunch of other healthcare organizations. So we've been doing a few things, definitely trying to entice by giving sign-on bonuses, also trying to really shorten the time between the initial contact and when we hire, because sometimes, even there are times where people have actually, we've hired people and they've just kind of ghosted us because they got a better offer. And so there's a number of things that we're doing. Also in terms of the piece of when they get there, the inclusion pieces, what are we doing for them when they come in? So to your point, we also kind of make sure that people have some kind of like buddy system where they can be partnered up, especially if they move to the area that they're connected to where to get food and where to get groceries, where to get whatever, just to kind of have that kind of wraparound kind of service approach, just to make sure people know that they're okay and we want them to stay. So
that's great.
Yeah.
I think from my experience, I'll talk about the companies that I've worked with and the trends that I'm seeing a little bit. I would say that corporate social responsibility or employee engagement programs in the past were very top-down driven. It was one of those things where a company would define their pillars of engagement, and everybody had to align to those pillars. One transformation that we're seeing a lot more of now is that they're trying to cultivate this grassroots engagement. And that's allowing employees to really participate in programs that they're interested in, not necessarily ones that directly align with the company. And this helps to kind of build this engagement platform where people are really focused on the things that mean the most to them. And then if you can get that and you can get friends to join you in that, you start to build this culture that is really engaging. I think one of my favorite stories I like to tell is Disney is one of our clients, and they opened up their programs and they said, listen, you can log any sort of act of kindness that you want in the platform. And it doesn't have to be anything at all, just something kind. And one person ended up posting a picture of him helping a turtle cross the road. And then all of a sudden this thing went viral. And every week employees were posting pictures of either helping turtles or helping other animals or something like that. And that was not a pillar of their principles, but it got everybody engaged and got everybody focused on their programs.
That's great.
So that's a wonderful segue in lead-in. So first a quick level setting that I did not do in the introduction. So Sanofi has approximately 4,300 employees that are based in Massachusetts, about 100,000 globally. We're a large life sciences company, just not to make that assumption. So in terms of so we do have such pillars that you referenced, Robert, in our corporate social responsibility. I think we've been privileged, and some of this comes from the ethos of Genzyme that Sanofi inherited, 10 plus years ago. But we've had leadership buy-in into kind of this acceptance of the challenge that we have to partner in the communities where we live and work and help to solve problems. Nevertheless, part of what has changed and is a part of the employee value proposition now is exactly what you articulated, that it's wonderful. Of course, we need leadership buy-in and we need, leaders to have kind of skin in the game around issues of DEI and social responsibility, but it's really the employees that are driving now the conversation about this is the type of workplace we want to have. These are the kind of things we want Sanofi to be involved in, into supporting. This is what we care about. And we want to, and that doesn't mean we can do everything, but it's really about listening and responding to not just the employees that you're trying to attract, but retaining the ones that we want to retain the employees, particularly in this very competitive, innovation-centered economy in the greater Boston area. So, I mean, that is something that, and that continues, like, I feel those changes because I don't manage on my own all of the employee engagement across the US, but just being able to kind of listen to the things that are impacting people's lives and what that means in terms of our contributions, upping matching gifts programs, and just kind of widening our understanding about what it means to kind of have a local impact for employees across the country. So yes, I completely agree, and that's something that's changed and is a part of our evolving value proposition.
Building off of that, I mean, DEI teams in corporate settings are attempting to make offices more hospitable. How are you empowering employees to engage on these topics? How are you facilitating those conversations? And how are you making sure that people's, when they express their thoughts or feelings about these issues, that they're being heard? And specifically, this came up in, when we were in the green room, but you mentioned that it's not just DEI anymore, it's DEI plus B. And I wanted to hear a little bit about that. B stands for belonging. And that seems like another component that I think is really interesting to include in this conversation. So you're nodding again, Rob.
No, that's not a nod for me.
No,
These are the
we'll let
experts
Dionne
on
go
that,
first,
for
yeah.
sure, yeah.
So before I answer the question, I'd be remiss if I did not talk about George Floyd. So I actually started in December 2019, and then worked for 3 months, laid the foundation, and then the pandemic hit in March, and then a few months later was George Floyd in May 2020.
Yeah.
And I share that because it was unbelievably transformative, and being in the DEI space for over 20 years now, suddenly the conversations got more real and deeper and richer. And at the same time, to your question, employees now feel like they can actually really say what they think, and they really do. So as I shared, we actually set up, we have councils like ERG groups, and there are 8 total, and every month we have over 300 employees that are engaging in DEI endeavors, and I tell them it's theirs, it's their baby. I kind of oversee it. I put parameters around what they should be focusing on, like policies and procedures, education, training, and research opportunities. They set the agenda for a meeting spot to have like discussions responding to any situation that may happen, and also just an opportunity to connect with the community. So those are the 4 kind of pillars that are in place that each council has to follow, but then they also have their own, organically, their own subgroups that they follow, and as to your point, they drive it. Wow. And it's unbelievably, it's amazing to see what they say, how they hold you accountable. Why isn't this happening? I had employees say, you know what, we don't have a place to pray for Ramadan. So I had to go and find a prayer space at one of our hospitals, and put in halal meat options. Wow. And so it's really fantastic to see what's happening.
That's amazing, creating those avenues. Does anyone else want to jump in on this?
Yeah, sure. So for us, I think it starts with the leadership setting the tone. Always, that's the driver for all such initiatives in the organization. And then the next action is always about giving agency to all our associates so that they can feel empowered to bring out any issue that they think is relevant for them. And that's in form of ERGs, the global DE&I council that we have, comprising of leaders and associates, across globe, across levels in the organization. Beyond that, it's also about, how do you have that inclusivity as a mindset? Because we are a technology organization, it's very important for the culture of innovation to flourish, which is a very important cultural pillar for us, is that everyone needs to feel safe, that they can, talk about things freely. So we did a whole set of workshops, starting with the leaders. We've just completed a gender sensitization workshop for all our leaders across the globe, so that some of the nuances or biases that may exist may remain hidden. Those get discovered, and they understand that there is a level of awareness, because with awareness comes the opportunity to address. So some of those actions, I think, and beyond that, we would obviously, like to constantly look for talent from underrepresented communities. So we look at that in various ways, and we also look at our processes and see if, we evaluate them. Are there metrics, that show us that there's certain biases that are at play? So some of these have helped us, build a globally representative organization.
That's really important.
And that all of what has been said is very true for us, just in this process of how the world changed and how the floodgates opened, particularly even from a DEI and inclusive perspective after George Floyd's murder. The richness, the diversity of the conversations even that we were having internally, whether it was bringing in the external to facilitate those conversations, has continued on to this day and will be, and it's demanded once again by our ERGs and just by employees saying, like, now I have to be seen. I can't go back to not being seen, maybe in the way they felt previous to George Floyd and the pandemic. That being said, the challenge now becomes in terms of how we're going to continue to facilitate kind of the involvement of an equitable workplace. We have to, at what point do we have metrics around things? At what point are we measuring? How are we continuing to challenge, even when we become fatigued by these conversations, unconscious bias, which we all have, and we have to, how do we not have our pendulum swing back to whatever the new norm is, particularly when it's around issues of race, religious, all kinds of equity. And so I think that's kind of where we are right now. We have the desire, we have the sincere commitment to it, but we have to continue to, those of us that are participating in the work, whoever we are internally, to keep driving kind of the progress. So operationally, our companies will never kind of go back to a state of complacency around any issues around DEIB, on and on and on.
So I just want to chime in because even though you used the word fatigue, and this has come up, it triggered because it came up in conversation. And what we try to tell people, or what we encourage our employees to participate in, is this critical self-reflection, and to ask yourself, why do I believe what I believe? How do I know what I know? Where did I learn what I know? And really think about, okay, how can I change my practice? At the same time, also think about who's on the margins? Like, who are the people that are not in the center who are being excluded? And so actually, to George Floyd murder, we actually implemented a 9:29 mindful moment at our organization. And so at 9:29 a.m. and 9:29 p.m., all employees, regardless of the day, we want them to stop and pause and practice self-reflection and think about people on the margins. And not just racially, but LGBTQ, anybody who is not regarded as a person and who's not treated respectfully, we're really trying to encourage that. And so, so back to the point about the fatigue, I will share respectfully that as a woman, as a Black woman, and even as a mom, I mean, it's these conversations, we cannot be fatigued by this. I can't put those titles or those identities on the shelf. They have to, those conversations have to continue to happen. And so we have to teach people to kind of be aware of other people's lived experience. And even though you may have a privilege, we all recognize we're not privileged as we think we are with the pandemic. We all got affected by it, but we have to just really be cognizant of other people and what they're going through, and what's before us is not necessarily what is the truth, but there's usually some things behind what's happening with people.
I think that's a great touch point for my next question, which, the pandemic has allowed for a much wider discussion about mental health in the workplace. And I think, I'm wondering if anyone can share examples about how they're prioritizing mental health and wellness on the part of their employees. This is a conversation that was not often, very rarely would you go to your boss and saying, I need a break, but I think this is something that we're all seeing, we're all feeling burnout. What does it look like when you're talking to your employees?
I think, so again, I'll look at this from the lens of working with a number of different corporations and the way that they're approaching this. Obviously, mental health is a critical component to this whole thing, and you can look at it in a number of different ways. When I'm looking at it, how can we engage folks outside of the business, outside of your day-to-day work, to allow for those mental breaks and that type of feeling and engagement with something that means a lot to them. We had a major shift when the pandemic hit, where we were going from in-person volunteer opportunities to now remote volunteer opportunities, and quite frankly, it was a tough transition for everybody because people like getting together and working together, and helping a cause. I think what we're starting to see now is that we're going to do some sort of hybrid model on a go-forward basis where, if you're willing to get out there and you're willing to assist in your neighborhood or your local food bank or whatever it might be, that those opportunities will be available to you. But even just that time that you can spend, hopefully, you get some time during the workday to actually spend on these activities too. Time that you can spend with colleagues, with other folks, focused on a mission or a cause that is important to you. That's a really great mental sort of break or deviation from your day-to-day work.
Dionne, you're coming from a health setting.
I can piggyback on that.
Yeah, no, I'm saying
Yeah.
you're in a healthcare setting, so you've got this as a crisis, I think.
Absolutely. And so we have a psychiatric hospital and also a behavioral health center that addresses mental health issues. And we do know that I've got two girls. We know that what's it called? Sorry. Eating disorders increased during the pandemic.
Sure.
A myriad of things just came out, and so to tie that back to the healthcare, it's a double-edged sword because we have people that are internally that can treat others with the mental health crisis, but they're also treating their patients that existed prior to, and then we have this influx of new patients that are coming in, and so they also need a break. And so it really kind of just underscored the importance of having work-life balance. And I know, like on my team, for example, I don't even question. I tell my team, if you need a break, just let me know. And don't feel uncomfortable, just tell me, because they can gauge. People know you know your limits, and I think that they should have that freedom to speak up and say, you know what, I can't take anymore. And I do the same thing, because ultimately we want to make sure that our employees are well. And then to your point about giving back, so on our councils, we actually have we do a lot of volunteerism. And a lot of donations to like Rhode Island food banks, because we often think that we're in the worst state, but then there's always someone who's worse than us. And so seeing seeing other people in different conditions and being able to help out, it really makes you feel good. So yeah.
I'm just still, Dionne, stuck on even what you're saying. And so all these things are connected. So none of these things are siloed, I think, as we all understand. There's a connectivity to having more transparency within the workplace, for people being able to show up as who they are, of having an environment that truly supports the notion of it's okay not to be okay. What this means in terms of disparities that exist within the workplace, the disparities that employees go to in their respective communities, or the communities that they care about or that they are from. All of this stuff is related. How we show up individually, who we are, the things we don't leave behind as our gender identity, our racial, our ethnic identity, whatever it may be, religious identity. So I'm still stuck on this powerful thing that you all are doing, at 9:29, like these mindful moments. That's also related back to individual. Yes, we need organizational and leadership support unequivocally. Employees are demanding that. I don't think there's any employer that would deny that this is a new time, and whether they are reticent to change or not, like we have to, or the employees will leave and we won't attract the employees that we need. I think there's an understanding of that, but it's, once again, now we're at this place where it's beyond that. Like, there is a link between all of these things, to having a healthy culture, having a healthy environment, to how we're making an impact externally, to what that means in terms of our DEI conversations, how employees feel at work, which is related to their mental health, what they're dealing with maybe their families or their ecosystems, which we all understand this exacerbation that's taking place still today, mental health exacerbation, given some of the residual, as we're understanding the residual impact of maybe isolation and the pandemic and the hardship. So I feel like I just love listening to you all, because these are all the things that in our respective roles we're trying to support and continue to usher in. So we have to keep not just the conversations going, but make sure that's linked back into something operationally, I think, that is different. The expanded benefits, the conversations, how we're bringing employees together, how we're defining the new culture that we're in this hybrid kind of work setting that's not going anywhere. Like, this is the way it's going to be. So it's exciting, and we have a lot of work to do, but I know that we all can do it, and supporting each other and learning from each other. So you got me going on that one. So.
That's good. That's great. Do you want to weigh in?
Yeah.
Back to you.
No, just expanding what you just said, Wendy. I think the realization were twofold. One, that we spend a maximum amount of hours in a day at work. So a lot of what we carry back from there has an impact on how we feel as an individual. So I think that kind of, hit home, I think, hardest during the pandemic. The second part is, as part of corporate culture, there was a lot of focus on physical wellness, and mental wellness was not a concept until very recently. So I think, but in terms of, the science of it is that it starts with mental wellness and goes into everything else. So I think those are very important recognitions that have happened due to the pandemic, and that's something that we all need to build upon. I think apart from initiatives, one particular aspect that I'm very proud of in my organization is this endeavor that we took to understand what makes an employee happy at work. And this was it was a collective exercise. So a group of associates across the organization coming together, talking about things that matter to them, and suddenly there were 6 pillars across the organization, which today we measure the happiness index by. And it's a range of things, how do I feel, whether I feel valued, whether I cherish the culture that exists in the organization, am I leaving a purposeful and meaningful, life? Things of that kind, which I don't think, frameworks gives us unless it's truly organically, developed. And I think that's something that I'm particularly excited about. We are into the 2nd year of assessment. We've just got our survey results. We're very excited about it, and it's a journey that we want to take forward.
I love that. I mean, I think it's so true, and some of you made this point, but unless you're measuring something, you don't really know exactly the impact that it's having in terms of a lot of these programs. When we talk about meaningful work, I think of it in the sort of scope of history, and it's a relatively new concept. I mean, the idea that, for generations, a job was merely a paycheck was certainly how my grandparents grew up, and, even my parents, they loved their work, but, they loved being not at work, too. But I think so many people now, particularly with Gen Z, really look for meaning in what they're doing. How are you seeing that incorporation of, allowing employees to define meaning and their mission and incorporate that into the work they're doing, and maybe changing how they would work normally to reflect that? Can you give me some examples of where and how you're listening to employees to make that meaning a bigger part of their lives?
Yeah, I'll start on this one because it's happening in real time in terms of how we're defining and managing our shared social value. And a lot of it, it is coming from employees in terms of where we need to be focused, the things that we need to be leaning into, the types of programs that we need to support as a company that ensure that everyone has the opportunity to thrive, that we are supporting equity. And Gen Z is just intolerant of moving slowly. And we love this. They're shaking up everything and saying, no, it's now, and this is what we need to do. And I love that the sense of urgency, I think, that they bring to workplaces and how we're creating and crafting social impact based upon what the employees want to do and what's important to them, and reflecting that back out in our engagement, in our philanthropy, in our thought leadership is like the change will be happening, but it's happening at a faster rate given some of like the Gen Z and the energy and kind of their authenticity in terms of how they, work has to be a reflection of them. I think more and more of us feel this way if we didn't previously, like this is who I am and I need to be able to express that in many different ways, not just in my role, but in what that means to who I am externally and the things that I care about. So we're just trying to keep up with the change that they're ushering in, and it's a really positive thing.
That's great.
Yeah, I think if I could piggyback, sorry, I'll go. Yeah. I didn't shake my head originally when she asked the question, but it's my turn now, I guess. So, I think to piggyback on that, and again, I've kind of reiterated this a few times, is allowing that grassroots component to build. Interesting little stat is that there's 1.6 million nonprofit organizations in the United States alone, which means that there's a plethora of different entities out there doing different things for social good. And allowing your employees to express the way that they feel and participating in the nonprofits, the 1.6 million nonprofits out there doing good, and not limiting sort of their scope of who they can engage with and who they can interact with, I think is really one of the shifts that I've seen over the last few years that has just been amazing, and seeing the transformation in the space. So, again, opening it up, allowing the employee to decide what is right for them, and building that grassroots is really what I'm seeing most.
So I have 2 Gen Zs in my house.
So
One's
you're
in
living it.
university.
You're not just, it's home and work.
And they say it like it is. They live their values. They're about social justice. They don't care about all these hang-ups, things that we're caught up on, and it's delightful. I love it. But when you put them into the workplace, however, to the point about metrics, they do keep you on your toes, and we do actually have metrics that we follow for certain things, and having that accountability is great to have them internal accountability, saying, hey, you said you're going to do X, Y, and Z, but this hasn't happened yet. So when are you going to do this? And I think that's fantastic. The other piece that I've encountered, however, is because they've literally grown up with smartphones in their hands, they sometimes don't recognize that you should agree publicly and disagree, disagree privately and agree publicly. And sometimes they would just go onto the internet and just put something on Facebook. And so it's like, okay, no, you can't actually articulate that against the company widely. So just those kind of little things, but they are pretty refreshing. I love it. It keeps you young.
Work in progress.
Definitely work in progress.
I think, in my experience, I think it's a great time to be part of, that whole revolution. How this generation is looking at work. It's challenging, no doubt about it, because there's a generation that thinks that work needs to happen in certain hours. It needs to happen between this time, and then only work is organized and delivered well. But I think what this generation brings to the table is, don't worry about when it needs to be done, just worry about the outcomes. I think, and we are also living in a very outcome-driven world. If you look at our customers, they expect the outcomes. So the whole concept of work has changed, with this generation coming in. And I think what also they bring to the table is their urgency to address issues. And that, in a way, kind of, also has a rub-off effect on, how they look at the work problems as well and how they solve them. So I think, but the challenge lies in how do we leverage that talent, and how do we ensure that the multi-generational workforce is effective when it comes to outcomes. And I think that's the role where coaching, mentoring, all of that has to play, and that's where the human sciences comes into play. So I think it's a very exciting time to be in.
That's great. Well, we've got 1:45 seconds left, so I'm going to do a quick round here. But if you could each use one word to describe the way you feel about this moment in time in terms of the workplace and the year ahead, what would you say? One word.
Exciting.
Excited.
Profound.
Optimism.
Changing.
All right. Well, I'll use my one word or two to say thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.